Arches National Park Adventure, July 30th to August the 3rd, 2018. This video is a condensed version of all that I did in the park. The second day, I made a climb to the iconic Delicate Arch. This is a pretty good hike, about 3 miles overall and a climb of about 500 feet. It's a pretty good test. They classified it as a difficult hike, but it wasn't that difficult. However, it is a good test. After about 35-40 minutes, I reached the top and once again was able to behold the stellar beauty of the Delicate Arch. That was it for the day. It was so hot that it was time to shut it down. Back to the campsite for some old cold beers and some reading. Tomorrow, Devil's Garden. Wednesday, August 1st. I knew I needed to get started early to get any semblance of a people-free zone. It wasn't as good as I would have liked, but it worked out pretty well. The nice thing is that to get to the trailhead was only about 1/3 of a mile from my campsite. It is almost 5 miles all the way out to Double O and back, and I took numerous side trips and backtracks for filming, so I figured I probably covered close to 8 miles. On the way to Double O, I passed numerous very interesting arches, but one of the most iconic is the landscape arch, which you can see in the background there. At that point, I was a little more than halfway to my goal. This was a kind of firewall portion of the trek. A lot of people decided at this point that they were not going to continue. It was slightly steep and exacting, but not too bad. I'm getting to the area where you can see the Devil's Garden really well. It is quite impressive. The beauty of Devil's Garden was somewhat muted due to the fact that there was a thin cloud layer, but the good part was that made it much easier on those of us who were doing the climbing during the day. It wasn't quite so hot, quite bearable. The landscape is just beyond stunning. Now for the final stretch to Double O. Just over this rock and there she blows, just a little off to the right. You can see the big O on top and the little O underneath. I go through the little O and attempt to find a place to climb up into the big O, but it was not to be found. So it was time to head back to the campsite. Again, passing the beautiful Devil's Garden. And then it was done. A couple of old cold beers, a good book, and dinner, and then time to call it a day as I watch an incredible sunset. Thursday, August the 2nd, Tapestry Arch and Broken Arch. The sun rises. It's a beautiful sight there in Arches National Park. You get an early start to the day, and just out back is a frisky little juniper titmouse. I had to slow down the video so that you could see him. And then it was off to Tapestry Arch. It was a wonderful morning, and the very fortunate thing was that I was the only one there the whole way in and the whole way out. There was no banter or conversation, just pristine silence. As I reached the crest of this hill, I was able to see Tapestry Arch. The stunning beauty of the place actually speaks for itself. What an amazing sight. As I approach Tapestry Arch, I am greeted by a very laid-back mule deer right there in my path. I have reached the arch and climb up into it. But once again, the scenery is just stunning. After my pleasant trek over to Tapestry Arch, I was now headed back over towards Broken Arch. It is now obviously a little later in the day. I didn't run into too many people, but by this time there were some that I did happen to pass by, and had to wait on for my video productions. It all worked out pretty well with not too much of a delay along the trail, but at the arch there was a small delay. There it is, another very impressive arch, and the broken spot can be seen by the green arrow. The arch was easily reached from this side, but of course I had to get through it and go to the other side and climb back up. It was pretty awesome. I explore the area for a few minutes and then I decide it's time to head back. To get this shot, I had to wait a little while because one gal took about a quarter of an hour to figure out how to get up into the arch. It was pretty comical, but she eventually made it, and I eventually got my video. One last beautiful photo of the arch and the beautiful scenery it framed on the other side. Time to head back. One more wonderful day of hiking in the continuum of incredible arches there in Arches National Park. A good book, a few beers, and the day was done. Then it's Friday, August 3rd, for Skyline and Sand Dune Arches. The normal approach to Skyline Arch is generally from the main road, but the opposite side of Skyline Arch is right next to the campsite where I was. So I took the opportunity to climb up to the arch, Skyline Arch, from the opposite side where there were no people, and I could actually get into the arch, which you could not do from the front side. It was another, what seemed to be an endless array of incredible views. Now time to head over to Sand Dune Arch. At the bottom of the hill, I came across another fairly common bird in the Arches National Park, a black-throated sparrow. Very distinctive little fellow. From the end of the campsite, I entered the trailhead for Sand Dune Arch. On the way over to Sand Dune Arch, I passed through some fins, some geological fins that have been formed over the past 100 million years, from which arches are formed. That was a pretty spectacular hike through that area. Coming out of the formation of fins, I had about a quarter mile of desert to walk through to get to Sand Dune Arch. From the main road, this is a very accessible arch, and so there was quite a few people in this area. And this is the arch. It was nice, but it was not nearly as impressive as I had hoped. So I headed back over to the campsite, and on the way you could see in the distance Broken Arch. which I trekked over to the day before. Now back to the area where all the fins were. Oh, how beautiful. This was actually my favorite part of the trek over to Sand Dune Arch. Much more spectacular than the arch itself. But this area was exceptional. I'm just about done for the day, at least the trekking portion. Later I will leave and visit a few more spots on the way out. It's about 5 p.m. and I'm packed up and headed down the road. As I leave, I pass Skyline on my left. I then make a short stop at Fiery Furnace, one more time past Balanced Rock, and then the Courthouse Tower's amalgam of rock structures, and a final descent into the Moab Fault as I leave Arches National Park. It was an awesome adventure here in the park, and now I'm headed for the West Coast and more adventures.